Welcome to Crowning, the show where birthing is a portal to your power. My name is Siobhan Joris, and I am a birth and spirit worker that helps heart led parents alchemize their fears of childbirth and rise as the leaders your ancestors have been praying for. We are here at the season finale of the first iteration of Crowning. So, this is episode 8, and we're going to be talking about sperm today. So, what I am so excited about today is that this is going to be the least traumatic episode yet. We started this off looking at the reproductive justice history and history of childbirth in the US, where I am. I'm based in San Francisco, if this is one of the first episodes you're watching. But we have really dug through a very detailed and, yes, inherently. Racist and violent history of birthing. But today, for our season finale, we're gonna turn the conversation to, and actually let me just asterisk that. I won't say this is not gonna contain anything that will traumatize or trigger you. That's why we will get into our rainbow of readiness to assess if this is a good time for you to take in this information. But what I will say is that this audience is mostly people who don't have sperm, and while it will bring up topics that will be of concern and conversation, especially if you are partnered with and may plan to have children, um, especially with men, um, it also is not going to be as intense as last week's episode, where we looked at more serious and kind of somber topics. So, welcome to Crowning. And first, let me put up here the Rainbow of Readiness, which is my little system for self assessing if you are ready today to engage with sensitive material. So, in here, we're looking from a nervous system perspective, and this is inspired and informed by Daria of Accountability Mapping's Rainbow of Tolerance, which is based on the Window of Tolerance by Lindsay Brahman and Dan Siegel. They both have versions of that. So, this is looking at your nervous system today. And now let's take 3 breaths together. I'm going to take 3 breaths with you, exhaling all the extra air and breathing in through the nose. Just allowing yourself to arrive here and taking our 3rd breath together. So now that we've paused for a moment, inviting you to check in with your body and assess where you feel in this moment. 2 to 4 is a place where optimal functioning and growth can happen based on what we know about the nervous system and how that allows us to be open to more information, to be open to change, and open to other possibilities of being. I'm taking a sip of water. With 1 being a underactivated, delayed response, kind of feeling shut down place, and 5 being overactivated, things we typically associate with anxiety, more rapid speech, or difficulty focusing, or being present. So you're welcome here either way. We are not doing this. This system mostly supports us when we're doing things like group energy work, somatic work, and things that dip into the subconscious. But today we're keeping it pretty light, pretty simple. It may be a lot of information and kind of heady, but I do my best to keep it in the body. So let me know in the chat where you might be at. And let's begin today. So I'm coming in here smilier than I've been the last few weeks. I am so happy that winter has passed. Thank you, winter, for what you do and what you serve in the cycles of life. However, goodbye. And yeah, I'm very happy to be in spring in the solar new year. It felt very visceral and like in my body, like I don't know, I felt like I had sandbags in my feet last week, just like dragging, was absolutely at a one most of last week. Hi, Vibecaster, you're at a four. All right, so just shaking off any extra energy. And obviously, move your body, do your thing during this. This is intended for you for anybody watching to be able to take um, in your own time. So today, the topic, like I said, is a little lighter than it's been in recent weeks for probably most of us. And I also got the most questions that I've gotten this whole time. Um, Crowning was conceived in fall of last year. I love talking about these topics. And as I've shared before, I've kind of been in this like push and pull of what to call myself, how to show up as a doula, especially because one of the reasons why I felt like I needed to make this decision of whether I was going to like lock in fully on birth and reproductive focused work is because to show up and serve in this work also requires a level of understanding and engaging with your industry and the news and the current events and the latest studies so that we can be informed to really show up. As a professional, I think it's kind of overlooked sometimes for not just birth workers, but for a lot of fields. That's like, if we are representing a field, we kind of have a responsibility to know what's the latest going on. And so that, I don't know, I just think it's important so that we're informed in what we're talking about. And there was a time where I wasn't attending births for a period. Um, and when I came back and it was time to start doing births again, I was feeling a little bit insecure because I was like, well, I haven't been in the hospital. I am not like super up to date volume wise of what the norm is in the policies because things can change all the time. And we talked about that a few episodes ago and I talked a lot about being a doula and kind of like the challenges of um, resourcing ourselves, especially when it comes to being covered by insurance, when it comes to changing hospital policies. And not to say that anybody who isn't up and like reading these things all the time is misinformed, but for me, the type of person I am, the type of brain I have, I want to know what I'm talking about. So one of my intentions of starting crowning was actually really to just like give me a place to um, learn more. And that's what dawned on me. That's what spirit was nudging me toward, was like, that's part of it, is like modeling and inviting y'all in to the process of learning. And there's so many like sub battles in our battle for better worlds for birthing. And one of them is for sure the battle with misinformation, with I'll consider this misinformation too, but even like generative AI summaries of things that really get it wrong. And that's not to bash um, what AI can do for people. However, when it comes to making informed decisions about our body, I just, on a factual level, wouldn't trust a summary of something that cannot hold the political landscape we exist within, does not know you as an individual and what might shape your decision making because your needs are unique. So that's what crowning was here to do. as well as honestly just kind of like free me to share the way that I want to share because I'm a long-winded bitch and I'm on year 7 in this work. And, being a doula is also not just about being a doula. You got to be a marketer. You got to be all these other roles that a small business owner has to take on. And I think any type of business owner, soul, especially like us creative service provider types who got in this because we wanted to like use our gifts. Um, Figuring out the type of content to share is a journey in itself. Um, I've learned over time I'm not one of those people that can just like consistently pick up my phone and record a reel or TikTok to the volume that those apps demand in order for it to be like fruitful to make that a priority. Like, I'm not a content creator. Um, when I get inspired, I am, but, they usually don't lead to sales, and also, followers don't lead to sales, and a lot of content creators will tell you that. So, yeah, I have been having this format of just chilling on here for an hour, hour and a half with y'all and pulling up studies, looking at them together, engaging in the chat with whoever comes live. Like, this feels really good to me, and um, that's why I started with this idea that it would be doula office hours. But there still is kind of like a volume thing of um, reaching people who want to ask their questions. So, as I kicked this off in January, we're on episode 8. We've covered so many topics. And if you go and look in the descriptions of the other videos on the channel, with the support of Marge, have been writing, um, time stamping the different questions and topics. But my bestie Midori really helped me to affirm to just like lean into my own nonlinear, neurodivergent style of sifting through information, of sharing, because um, it just feels really natural and more fruitful for me to invite y'all into the context and the universe of birthing versus delivering short snippets with hooks and clear, short answers uh, that's just not for me. So, I have visions of what the future of crowning will look like. It's feeling like inviting other birth workers in. It's feeling like inviting maybe even past clients or friends who've given birth in to share their birth stories. And that excites me. But for now, this is going to be our last episode for at least the month of April. And, I'm also tempering the amount of things that I do um, that are just like giving to the community, unpaid. I don't really like, I feel like I receive a lot from this, so I don't really think of it as like unpaid work, but my spirits are like, okay, you need to focus on the clients who have hired you for the spring, because it's just given Mother's season. We got Mother's Day coming up in May, and I'm preparing for a local party that I've been dreaming about for at least 3 years. I've been imagining this little like Mother's Day celebration, family celebration, especially as a single mom. Um, I've had a lot of clients that are also single moms, and I have a lot of friends that are single moms, and there's this like trend of reframing I'm seeing increase on social media, of reframing single moms as matriarchal households. And I love that personally, as somebody who was raised by um, a single mom with complexities of, you know, men right now are just kind of like floating in and out of their families. And I think that That's obviously a big generalization, but where I'm coming from on that is, like, kind of the death of patriarchy, y'all, and I shared on Instagram some thoughts on that, last week that are really just acknowledging and accepting that everything that's happening on a collective level the with late stage capitalism, with the crumbling of systems that are rooted in supremacy, and patriarchy is a supremacist ideology. Um, that stuff's going to show up on personal levels too. And it's not exclusive to men. There are also many of us, including myself in the past, whose identity was rooted in values that I was not fully aware were born of patriarchy, and patriarchy feeding on my energy and extracting from me. And mothering is just a really, really big part of that. Um, the struggles of single moms are rooted in patriarchy because that system has been designed to crush us, to make it almost impossible for us to be in the workforce, be out of the house 9 to 5. Um, and there's just so many things I can say, and I didn't really like I said, the topic today was sperm, so it is it is related to this. Um, and let's just put this comment on screen for a little bit. Because matriarchy is not about supremacy of women or mothers. It's about centering children and centering um, the family from a priority that we're here to nurture life and to let life thrive. So that involves our animals, that involves our plants, land, all of it. And yeah, with the acknowledgement that talking about, uh, I want to acknowledge that the language today is limited, that we're talking about sperm and paternity, and obviously, well, not obviously, but let me say that for my values here. I understand that not everyone who carries sperm is a man. I understand that there is complexity to referring to the person who provides sperm as a father because there's sperm donors, there's all types of nuances to the conversation. But for the sake of today, know that when I'm talking about paternity, I'm talking about the person that's providing sperm. And if anybody knows better words, I tried to do some research on how to better refer to that, and there's not really any, we've kind of settled in for gestational parents as the people with the uterus that carry the baby, but there's not quite an equivalent to, I'm like, is it the fertilizing parent? That feels kind of icky to me. So we're going to stick to paternity for today. And the question that I got, so the question I got was from our listener, Glessy. Thank you, Glessy, who asked, is there a correlation between the health of the father slash partner and the severity of symptoms that the mother slash birth parent may feel, such as nausea, vomiting in the first trimester, etc.? So, great question. And my first answer when I read this was, I'm not sure. I knew it was a yes, but I had not looked specifically at the evidence. And so I did that since this was asked. And I actually stopped myself from reading too far into it without y'all, because that's what we're here to do, is get the answers together. So the cool thing is that there are a lot of studies around this, and we're going to look today not only at this specific question of the pregnancy symptoms that might be impacted, but we also are going to look at Things like preeclampsia there's a lot of studies on that. Also, um, just the baby's health, and this I think is building on our it's actually a necessary follow-up to our conversation on epigenetics that we started last week. And so, we talk so much about um, the mother's role, the gestational parent's role, and I think that's who we see taking the most having the most intentionality about our wellness when it comes to our fertility and um, pregnancies. But just like we take so much responsibility under patriarchy for whole family issues, for our lineages, for our children, um, men have been off the hook for their responsibility when it comes to the health and wellness, not only of the people that they impregnate, but also their children. Because there is a lot of evidence that the people who carry the sperm have an equal role, and maybe even in some, for certain conditions, a larger role. So let's take a look. Let's take a sip of water first. So, we got a whole lineup of studies, and kind of in no particular order, I'm going to, yeah, let's just share the screen here. I didn't really know what to narrow it down to because there's so many. So we're just going to kind of skim through today. And as always, all the links will be in the description, probably by the time you watch this back, if you are not here live with me. So here we go. Dun, 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 dun. This was published in September 2025, so this is newer. And we're going to look at, let's see, I want to make it as big for y'all as I can. There we go. Here we go. I don't even know if y'all are reading along with me, but honestly, I should probably put this in the audio version as well. Shall I? That's kind of one of the things I'm going to be doing in the recess after this season, is thinking about where else can I share this? How might I make this even more digestible? And I have my truest goal. And if anybody knows how to make this happen, I would love a sponsor for this show. I would love this show to be supported by maybe a network that's interested in reproductive justice and gender inclusive pregnancy and parenting conversations. So if you're that person out there, I'm putting this into the airwaves that we want crowning to continue. And if you love this show, then put in the comments of the video that you want to see more of it, as well as what else you want to hear about, because I want to keep doing it. I love it. I love yapping, and I feel like so many great things have come from this so far in the conversations that have followed and the reflections that listeners viewers have sent to me. So let's look at this. We're just going to look, so placenta. We're going to start with talking about the placenta. So for those that are not aware, the placenta is the organ that is created during pregnancy that is actually the baby's genetic twin. And so if you're familiar with the umbilical cord that attaches from the belly button, that cord then attaches to the placenta. And the placenta has like all of the stem cells and blood, and it's just like everything. The wellness of a placenta, the health of a placenta can also tell us a lot about the baby's health when they come out. And to not take us on a fully side quest here, I will say that one of the ways we've been able to understand the impacts of COVID-19 on pregnancy and babies is by looking at the placenta. And that's something that midwives were talking about, is people who contracted COVID during their pregnancy. were showing some really concerning things were like reflected in the placenta. And so it's just a really important thing. And I, in fact, have been growing in the belief that there's also a lot of spiritual associations with the placenta. Again, this is your baby's genetic twin and part of them. It is the only time we create an organ just for this event. And many people also don't know that they have to birth the placenta. And so I talked about that with home birth clients this week, like just making sure y'all know that after the baby is born, then within like 20 minutes or so, you'll also need to birth the placenta. You'll get a contraction and have to push that out as well. So there's so many conversations on what you can do with that placenta. Some cultures eat it. Actually, humans are one of the only species that don't automatically eat our placenta. If you've ever seen a dog give birth, it's very common for them to, cats as well. Pretty much most mammals will eat the placenta, and that gives nutrients back to the birthing parent as well. So, this here is looking at how paternal nutrition impacts placental development and childhood metabolic health. So let's see here. The abstract. Early life programming is a major determinant of lifelong metabolic health. Yet current preventive strategies focus almost exclusively on maternal factors. So, um, thinking about how during pregnancy, the pregnant parent will do a lot of things like tests for gestational diabetes. They have us drink this like super sugary drink and then sit and draw blood to see how we're metabolizing sugar in order to determine if there is gestational diabetes or other metabolic concern. Um, Emerging experimental and preclinical data reveal now that a father's diet before conception, particularly high fat intake, also shapes offspring physiology. Here we synthesize the latest evidence of how such diets remodel the sperm epigenome during two discrete windows of vulnerability: testicular spermatogenesis and post testicular epidermal maturation. So, this is like looking at the sperm health and how that might relate to the babies, the placenta and the baby. So let's see here. The early life environment plays a critical role in shaping our long term health trajectory, influencing susceptibility to metabolic disorders, obesity, and diabetes. Increasing evidence is pointing to the importance of a father's health prior to conception, which can exert profound effects on pregnancy, offspring development, and disease risk. One of the most striking examples of developmental programming is the intergenerational transmission of metabolic disease risk. Children born to obese or diabetic parents face a higher likelihood of developing obesity, insulin resistance, and cardiometabolic disorders later in life. This relationship is well documented in maternal fetal health, but recent studies demonstrate that paternal habits can similarly predispose offspring to metabolic dysfunction. So they're looking here at obesity rates, type 2 diabetes rates, and they're specifically talking about these studies in Europe. So I'm going to keep on scrolling, and here's a great picture of a placenta. Let's see. Can I zoom us? No, that's not going to help us here. Let's see. Okay, that didn't work. Anyways. Oh, there we go. That's a better method. Still learning how to oh, here we go. I think that's the biggest I could get it here. This is a placenta here. So people also, it's common for people to make art there are midwives and doulas who will take the placenta and it still has some blood on it, and they'll put it on a piece of paper, and you could see what it looks like, the tree of life, um, as you could see here. And those prints are really, really beautiful and special for families to have. Let's see. So this one, honestly, it's getting really into, as with everything, really into the sciencey language, which is great, but I think we're kind of understanding the takeaway here, which is that um, there are factors, yeah, that they men the paternal factors that influence placental development are here. Um, Not to brush through it, like I said, I stopped myself from reading too deeply into everything prior. So I don't want to bore y'all with the details, but that's why the links will be provided so you can get into the nitty gritty if you're the type of person that likes that. But we got a bunch of other studies to look at too. So let's move on. We know now that they have a role, and it's that there's a whole bunch of evidence pointing to that. So let's just go to the end here. The findings reinforce the notion that sperm is not merely a vessel for genetic material, but a dynamic communicator of environmental history and health status. As such, paternal nutrition emerges as a key target in the effort to optimize not only reproductive success, but also the lifelong health of children. Integrating paternal health into public health policy, fertility care, and early life interventions represents both a challenge and profound opportunity for improving intergenerational health outcomes. So, boom. Key takeaway here is that it should not just be the mother or gestational parent focusing on their nutrition and wellness while preparing for conception. It's really important that the sperm providers do as well. And my brain's already going to what type of assessments, and maybe this is something I'm going to have to, like, do I look that up right now? I'm like, what are the requirements for sperm donors? I'm just doing a quick little goog. I see recommendations. I see arguments for why guidelines matter, but I kind of doubt that there's any way to fully, yes, I'm sure they can run tests and probably like blood tests, physicals, for the health of it, but those are also very flawed as well, right? You know, even the language in here of obesity is limited, because that is not always a indicator of what your metabolic health is gonna look like. At least not the only indicator. So let's move on to the next one. Hmm. Oh, one of my notes that I took, which study I wrote down some notes as I was reading last night. But yes, I want to mention this, and I think it's going to come up in one of these, is that majority of the placenta is fetal tissue that comes from the father's genetic, and that the placental health will directly shape their experiences of symptoms like nausea, blood pressure, and weight. So I think that's what this will get into. Here we go. So, does my partner's, oops. Okay, guess we're gonna change the window. Normally it lets me, oh, here we go. Share this tab instead. Here we go. Does my partner's health actually affect my experience with morning sickness? Let's see what they got to say. And here's a great stock photo of someone with morning sickness. Ah, experiencing nausea or vomiting in early pregnancy, you're not alone. About 70% of women deal with some form of morning sickness. Um, so the first distinction, which I see them getting into here, is the terms for morning sickness. So morning sickness refers to the nausea and vomiting many people experience during the first trimester of pregnancy. Despite the name, it can occur at any time of day. For me, when I was pregnant, it was usually the afternoon. It's typically triggered by hormonal changes, particularly rising levels of human chorionic gonadotropin, gonad- gonadotropin, an estrogen, HCG. HCG is the hormone that pregnancy tests for. That is often referred to as like the pregnancy hormone, and it's really only present when it can only be present when you're pregnant, and therefore that's why, just like pregnancy test tip, if it's a faint line, you're pregnant. um, or at least were pregnant. Early miscarriage is very common. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, but there has to be a pregnancy for that hormone to be present. So just know that if you're like, the line's so faint, so I must not be pregnant. No, boo, it cannot be there without you having been pregnant. So that is HCG. And let's see here. Most symptoms go away for most people by weeks 12 to 14. However, symptoms can sometimes be more severe than usual or persist for a longer period. Now, HG, hyperemesis gravidarum, is a more extreme form of morning sickness that has persistent vomiting, dehydration, weight loss, nutritional deficiencies. That usually requires medical monitoring and treatment, and in rare cases, hospitalization. So, stats that I pulled on my own for us today is that HG is rare. It occurs in about 0.5 to 3% of people. Um, so those are like severe vomiting, can't keep food down, big weight loss, and that is of concern, and typically is medicated by medication is recommended by your provider, because you need to be able to keep food down in order to nourish your baby. And so, again, little side quest, fact or topic is, this is why harm reduction and the conversation around various plant medicines is nuanced, and why I believe that more doulas and providers need to be informed about harm reduction, especially around cannabis use, because some people, and while smoking is not recommended, there's other ways to utilize cannabis. There have been many people, and there's increasing evidence around what scenarios would make cannabis beneficial to people, and this is one of them. Um, Cannabis is often recommended to cancer patients for eating and appetite as well. And so, while somebody who is having a healthy pregnancy may not consider it, although it's, you have you have autonomy. Um, if it's a matter of getting food down to nourish your body to grow a baby, that is a situation that can often, that just may be something people choose. So let's keep going. Does your partner's health play a role in your morning sickness? Although it might sound far fetched, some research has suggested that their genetics may influence how your body responds to pregnancy. For example, certain genes, which this cites the study that we looked at, may affect how your placenta develops, which influence CG levels. Additionally, immune system differences between partners may contribute to how the body reacts to pregnancy. So, this is kind of giving us a little look at it, but we're going to look even further at the studies here. Okay. Now, NVP is the other way of referring to morning sickness. It just stands for nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. So, NVP, not to be confused with the MVP, is that occurs in about 70 to 85% of people. Um, whereas HG, that more severe one, is again less than 3% of people. So, nausea and vomiting in pregnancy is a widespread condition which may impact the quality of life. The objective here was to understand the role of placenta, which is mostly made up of fetal cells, in NVP, and looking at the relationship between NVP and different partners with the same mother. So what they were looking at is people who have carried multiple pregnancies and what the difference in their pregnancy symptoms look like with different paternity for the children. So they assessed nausea and vomiting in two groups of women, of 100 women counseled in Toronto, using a score from 1 to 5, 5 being the most severe. The first group had more than or 2 or more pregnancies, that's what this means, with the same partner, and the second had 2 or more pregnancies with 2 or more partners. So scores were average across pregnancies, partners, and overall. Let's see. And again, we're getting into lots of numbers, and I don't mean to like scroll over the numbers. Um, However, I just am like keeping it realistic here about what we have the capacity to look at here. So, is this gonna let us read more? Thank you. Tell me more. What? Maybe I do need to read these more before because I thought we were gonna get more out of this. Oh, I need to log in. Okay, let's see if I could find this because I really, really wanted to see what the outcome of this was, and I'm kind of bummed that I'm gonna copy and paste this. So again, this is my example of attempting to share out loud. Let's see. Is there going to be an article that's going to tell us the outcome? And this is why we got to know how to research because we got to poke around. Obviously, stories like the other one that are like, I try to mix in both like news coverage with the actual studies because I think that, let's see, I think that it helps us build familiarity with how to just kind of like check these things when they're like saying something or when they're just bullshitting. Hmm. And let's see here. I know that the answer was yes because that's why I can't find what led me to this. I was searching. I was searching. I've been searching. I've been searching. Give me something different. Yeah. Okay. Might need to move on from that one. Because the next one, again, the conclusion there was yes. The conclusion there was yes, that different partners helped to see that um, there are different types of pregnancies with the nuance that some pregnancies are just different. Every um, we looked last week at epigenetics and how the DNA of the gestational parent is altered through um, is altered by carrying a pregnancy. And one stat is that it's allegedly changed for at least 7 years. You carry the DNA of that partner. And I think that's connected to the studies that our cells in general regenerate every 7 years. You are not physically, cellularly the same person that you were 7 years ago. And to me, that like offers a lot of hopefulness in terms of what we have the ability to our ability to self-heal. And so through food and the actual like rooting elements that we put into our body to feed ourselves, um the things that we inherit, the things that are the trauma that's stored in our body um through our lived experiences. Like there is just so much evidence, like the last few weeks, if you take away nothing else, let one of the things be that we have been able to see such incredible evidence for our ability to transform from our DNA to our bodies, wholly. And there's something different, we have a spiritual body, so I think that affects things. I also want to get into like the fascia in another episode, because there's increasing information about the fascia, and I think that does have kind of like a spiritual aspect to it of what's carried, as well as the water that's in our bodies. So again, just really wanting to highlight um, the agency that we can that's available to us when it comes to um, changing in our bodies. And one of the anecdotes and like things that I noticed, even that has kind of informed my, let's see, one of the things that has actually really informed my understanding and belief of this has been my dreams and ancestor work since being a mother and carrying two pregnancies from the same person. And one of the ways, like I knew that my DNA had changed, and that also like paired with the concept that we can access the wisdom of our ancestors and spirits through the DNA, and that those stories live in us. And I believe that with things like hypnosis, which we looked at the evidence for last week with epigenetics, that allows us to like zone in on the stories that are encoded in that DNA to like access and be present with in this state of focused autonomy, which is what my teacher Desiree calls a state of hypnosis, to be in this focused state with one, just like present with one thing at a time. I was able to notice the shifts in my spirituality, and not just my spirituality, like the spiritual presence that was in me after getting pregnant. And I think that one of the ways that was possible for me to like spot and understand was kind of just based on the fact that my my ex-partner, the father of my son, um, is a different has ancestors of a different race and like just different cultural background. So my son, for me, I'm Filipino and Irish. I've done ancestry DNA, so I see that's pretty much confirmed like Western European and Filipino and Chinese ancestry. And my ex-husband also did that with me, and so I know that my kids kind of like general DNA makeup is, and they're about uh, a quarter African lineage. And I swear, when he was younger, my dreams started to change, and I'm a very, very active dreamer. I engage with my spirits a lot and ancestors a lot when I when I dream. And so the big like, I guess the big indicator was when I'm having dreams of Black ancestors and Black mermaids, y'all. I'm gonna say this till the day I die. Everybody was tripping about the Little Mermaid live action being Halle Bailey, and because she's Black, and people are like just being racist about that. But I'm like, mermaids are Black, y'all. Mermaids are Black. At least the ones that I've seen in my dreams, meditations. Obviously, they could be anything. And obviously, they're not subjected to the racial constructs. But when I'm thinking about like just where mermaid stories kind of like came from that I've experienced, and this like West Africa across the Atlantic to the Caribbean connection. I actually think that's what made the live action really freaking cool. Um, I'm gonna actually really defend that live action Little Mermaid. Looking at the comments here. Yeah, yeah. And you know what? If Yeah, taking years to regain yourself after a breakup, it's literally the detaching of your physical bodies, especially not to just go there, but like the mixing of your DNA, even if you didn't get pregnant. Like we know that sexual partners can change our pH levels if you have a vulva. Um, and so there's like something biological in that, and very, it's both spiritual and biological to like have to truly like detach and heal from the enmeshment with other people. um I won't go as far as to, I'm not going to get into the concept of like soul ties, but maybe the soul ties people are onto something. Though I minus the purity aspect. If you don't know what I'm talking about, good for you, because there is just very silly things that people, I won't say silly, just things I don't fully agree with. Anyways, my point here was that after carrying the pregnancy of th- my ex-husband, who, it's possible that even his like Italian and Irish ancestors come through to my dreams too, but it's harder for me to like clock that they're not necessarily mine. um, but I know I don't have Black ancestors. So, specifically, I would have this recurring dream where I would be sitting at a table in Jamaica. He's Jamaican. So, I would like always be sitting in this home, and this like grandmother figure would just be telling me stories and like cooking for me. And so I'd be um constantly, or in those earlier days, I would be frequently sitting there listening to family stories, hearing her accent, who I know their family, so I could recognize the accents. And that I absolutely believe is connected to the DNA. And now that I'm getting more distant from that experience, I don't experience that as much anymore. My son's 7. It's been 5 years since my last pregnancy, and that one did not, I did not birth from that pregnancy, and so I can kind of feel the physical, visceral experience of those spirits kind of, like, softening, whether it's what I'm going through on in my life, but I love engaging with my son's ancestors. But yeah, the stories were alive in my DNA, and the mermaids were alive in my dreams. And there was one in particular that just like opened my world. This one dream where I'm like, basically, okay, I'm just gonna go into the dream, okay? So this episode is so unhinged and all over the place, but you know what? We're on finale, and people said they wanted more stories. So here's the dream I'm gonna let y'all in on. So in this dream, this happened when probably my son was about 3 years old. in the dream, I'm carrying him and we're running down this hill, and there are two white men with guns chasing us. And I'm like running, it's nighttime, running in the forest, running away from them. And I see this like river that kind of like a body of water, gentle at night, that I like go in, and it goes into a cave. And I could remember every detail of it because it was so real for me, that there's just like a certain number of dreams that like I can never forget. Do y'all have dreams like that where you're like, I lived that? Um, and so in this dream, I am like carrying my baby, and we're going into, I'm like wading through these like waist deep waters, and there is a cave, and I like push open this rock, and it opens up to this cave that was kind of like a cenote. I don't know what the, I don't know what, let me see if I can get an image. But it was like, oh yeah, here we go. Oh my God, I have chills already. um, just kind of like an open cave. Let's see if I can find one that represents what I was experiencing. Because it was like, I have chills right now actually thinking about it. That hmm, I'm gonna pull the picture first. Here, this one is like kind of closest to what I'm trying to describe here. So y'all have the image. Um, let's see. Thank you to this travel page. So it looks like this. It looked like I stepped into this cave, and basically was like this, surrounded, but there was an opening at the top, and it was a full moon, and this dream's shining in, so I could see it all. And oh my God, I could just feel it and see it right now. There were mermaids everywhere. There were mermaids, and they specifically looked like they were Black, African ancestry, that had the scarification. If y'all are familiar with scarification, um, I'm not sure what cultures do it, but I know there are African cultures. That's so broad, but this, I specifically believe this is West African that I'm talking about. Um, and so they had like scarification, and then their skin was like blue, like, you know, it was nighttime, so they were showing as blue to me. And I knew they were mermaids, but like when they, instead of having like one tail, it was like their legs each had like fins coming off of it. But then when they were like stepping up, there was like a stone centerpiece of this cave, kind of like you see here. It's kind of bigger though, like a stone, like center rock. And when they were there, they could just like walk on 2 feet. Um, I just can never forget it. Like, there was a centerpiece of like this big stone platform with this like throne kind of rock on it. And I remember going in there and one of them like grabbing me and hiding us behind it. And they were like, "You're his mother." So I knew that's how I knew too, like, these aren't my spirits. They were talking about the baby, and I was protecting the baby, and they were like, "You're his mother, so you're safe." And they like hid me behind this rock. And then those two white men were like still following us, and they followed us into the cave. And I remember they came into the cave. They couldn't see the mermaids, but the mermaids drowned them. So that dream is like stuck with me for life. And I actually went to talk to a psychic about it. Ashley Sankofas. I'm gonna find their link. Find her link. I hope she's doing well. It's been a few years since this, but I basically like I was like, I want to find a psychic of Caribbean descent, so that I can really, like, a Black Caribbean psychic, to really like dig into this and to figure out like do these spirits want from me? How much can I work with them while still being authentic to myself? And what she basically told me was like, that was like another life vision. And in that, basically saying like that happened, but you're the only one who could see that it was mermaids. Like they just drowned. So I don't know the relevance of why I shared that, but related to how sperm can change you, I think that it altered my DNA to have mermaid dreams. So we're gonna leave the story at that today. If I didn't already get unhinged on here, that is where we took it. Um, but I stand on that. I stand on that, and I stand on the potential to tap into our DNA to access ancestors. And when you then mix that DNA with other people, it's almost like I see it almost as like a program update, a like iOS update, your operating not iOS, but operating system in general, update where it's like, "Doo-doo-doo, you now have access to your children's ancestors and DNA." And what we can do with that, listen to their stories, learn from them, heal them, elevate those ancestors, and learn those patterns that have been inherited, and work with them and venerate them. So, hopefully, everybody watching is on that with me. And if you're like, girl, you just took it a little bit too far than I'm comfortable with, then, I understand that and respect that. But you might just get pregnant and start having dreams of mythical creatures that aren't probably that mythical. Other interdimensional beings, if you will. Interdimensional beings is what the government has referred to aliens as, which I don't know. I'm gonna pause there for the vibe check from the audience on how y'all feel about mermaids, interdimensional beings, dreams, DNA, and sperm. As we now go into our next segment, ring the bell. That's for me. That was for me to clear that thought. So other things, I'm looking at my notes now because I got a little bit detached from like the links that I'm looking at with my actual notes, and I started late today because my internet was acting funky and whatever. I'm gonna throw all the links in there for y'all to read it yourself, but I'm not gonna trip too much on where exactly these statements are coming from because I trust right now everything I'm reading off came from an evidence-based article. So smoking. Smoking has an effect. And so, if you're just joining us, I see some more viewers trickling in. We're talking about the importance of the paternal health, of men's health, cis men specifically, or sperm carriers, their health and wellness, and that impact on both the um, both the mother or gestational parent's experience in pregnancy. We looked at that and saw that yes, it can impact nausea and vomiting uh, and our health. And so, takeaway from that is for cis men to be mindful of their nutrition, to be mindful of their daily habits, including smoking, because that has a very big impact on the placenta health, which can then have a really big impact on the health of baby and their mother. So there's another one. There's also a there's also studies that look actually at the more holistic level and the relational health. and how the relational wellness between, um, we're talking about cis hetero couples right now, and please, understand the limitations of the language. But there's also um, a study looking at even couples who ended up separating, the support levels that these mothers receive from the partners actually does there is evidence pointing to that even just being supported emotionally and spiritually impacted the severity of NVP, which we talked about stands for nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. You came at the right time, Sanctuary Studio. Yep. Crowning, the show where we talk about mermaids and sperm and their intricate connections, okay? Where else can you get mermaids and sperm in the same live stream? So, let me find I have so many links here. I'm gonna Here we go. Partner support. I'll close some of these other ones. Okay, so let's bring it back to the evidence, okay? And anecdotal evidence. Yeah, you are in the right place. Yes, you are. Welcome. So let's talk about the effects of partner support and the use of oral contraception during relationship and those impacts on nausea and vomiting and pregnancy, aka the real NVP. So, a recent study focusing on dietary predictors of NVP found that people with higher levels of partner support and those who had used oral contraception when they met the father both tended to report less severe NVP compared with previous non users or those with less supportive partners. That's really interesting to me. Um, I want to keep reading because that's interesting that they're looking at both contraception and partner support in the same study. So they use a large sample of people from 4 countries who retrospectively scored their NVP experience during their first pregnancy. So these are retrospective online surveys, which means that they're asking them after it had already happened, asking people to reflect on it. And so just based on that alone, we know there's going to be, based on to me what we look at with hypnosis, which is that no memory, every time we recall a memory, it changes a little bit. And so I'd be curious about, um, just there's always going to be subjectivity if it comes to a retrospective report. So, yeah, yeah. Life affirming nectar. So glad you're here. Also, pregnancy dreams in general are wild. I was not pregnant when I had those dreams, but I would note what dreams you're having during pregnancy as well when it comes to um, different spirits and uh, beings coming through. So, this is so interesting. So it says women who had used oral contraceptive when they had met the father of their first child tended to report lower levels of NVP, but the effect size was small and did not survive adding the country to the model. Okay. There was no relationship between NVP and partner support in couples that were still together, but there was a significant effect among those that had since separated. So women whose ex partner had been supportive reported less severe NVP. Also, women who were older during their first pregnancy reported less severe NVP. And there were differences between countries. So I'm going to read more of this. So, oh no. Okay. This definitely, everything will be linked. Um, but yeah. So there's evidence pointing to even if you break up, if they are supportive and showing up for you, and I'm wanting to know more about the age aspect when it comes to this nausea experience. So let's take a look at a lighter article because everything's been so loaded with hormonal language. Oops, I'm getting a. Oh, that's okay. Getting notices that my connection might be struggling. Okay, so father's health can affect newborns, but don't fret. Fathers with chronic illness may have a higher risk of having a child who's preterm, low birth weight, or needs NICU care. So again, this all of this today is just building the case for why it's super important to keep men's health and your partner's wellness if they are a cis man or person with sperm, um, in keeping their wellness in mind and their nutrition in mind and their lifestyle habits in mind. So we looked at smoking, we looked at nutrition, um, we looked at even just how they show up as a supportive person. All of these things can have a profound impact on not only your placenta development, but your baby's health and the when they're even born. Preterm means like born um, before they're to term, which is usually at least 37 weeks, 39 weeks ideally. And most common for first time person giving birth is like 40 weeks and 5 or 6 days, I think is the most common. That's the typical um, due date or like birthing date. Sorry, not due date, for people birthing. Um, Past studies have shown how paternal age affects newborn outcomes, and that's a big one because another side quest I want to talk about. Do y'all notice that we are getting so much propaganda around big age gap relationships? And I don't consider, it's all subjective. Like I don't think like, 10 years whatever. But there are there's a show on Netflix right now called Age of Attraction, and these couples are, like, 30 years old, and it's not just men older than women. There's a woman who was dating a guy, got engaged to a guy who was younger than her son, which I just I'm not gonna comment further on that, but when there are PDF files being exposed as leaders of the world, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're being asked to normalize way older or huge age gaps like that. And so when I think about this, I think about how many, and now I'll talk about men because it is men who, get off the hook on this. How many men are out there older looking for young wives? And I've seen this. I love watching dating shows, reality TV. And I also am in this Facebook group called Are We Dating the Same Guy? Which like exposes, I don't know, it's very cis hetero culture, but I love it for the tea sometimes. Um, of people kind of like there's it's normally intended for people to like warn women about dating certain men, but then there's also a related page where people will like post their um like vouch for somebody that they know, and so often I'll see women post on there vouching for my friend Steve. He's 47 years old and he's looking for someone in the age range of 25 to 35. And all these men who will not date somebody their own age. And it's because they want to have children. And I'm very curious if the Steves out there and the Donalds out there are even thinking about their own sperm health, because there is so much more evidence now that sperm is, and gosh, I'm going down a big pipeline right now because I'm just going to go there. These are usually the same people who put themselves in and want to normalize these like big, and I'll just say that there, it's not just about the age gap, it's about power dynamics. um, these big power dynamic gap relationships tend to have more, not always, but can tend to have views that are on the more conservative or the side that also claim things like vaccines are causing autism. No, babe, your sperm count is actually causing autism. So let me make sure I link that article in here because I just remembered that I didn't even get to that. There's so many things that the sperm is impacting. And that's one of them. That's actually one of them. And I need to actually shout out to Fertility with Adrienne, who has talked about this on her platform as well. She's an acupuncturist, and she's talked quite a bit about people overlooking the sperm health when it comes to people who are concerned about various um, disabilities, conditions, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Past studies shown, Eisenberg said, generally couples are not counseled about paternal health factors when they're trying to get pregnant and ultimately have a healthy child. His study analyzed data from uh, almost 786K births in the US from 2009 to 2016 and aims to shed light on just how much influence dad's health has. The results suggest there's a reason to pay closer attention to the father's health when people are trying. The team looked at a variety of chronic paternal illnesses, including cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, and depression, paying attention to how babies with ill fathers fared at birth. It turned out the more chronic conditions the father had, the more likely the newborn, would encounter an issue, namely low birth weight, preterm birth, or NICU admittance. Oh, 36 weeks is preterm. Okay. I said 37, so fact check on me. Uh, let's see. Fathers with chronic metabolic disease were about 20% more likely to have a newborn preterm with a low birth weight and had a 28% increase in risk for their child needing NICU care. Parents and future parents, take heed, but don't be too alarmed. The increase, though statistically significant, are modest for the most part. There isn't a whole lot known about how the dad's health before conception affects newborn babies. This study provides data to say the father's health can have an impact on birth outcomes. So now we get into a little bit of like media literacy in there and or like critique that's like, okay, this is coming from Stanford Medicine. This is something that's really big, but do you notice how they like immediately want to soften and say like, I don't want to be alarmist about this. Um, have all the information. It's almost like they're like protecting even through this story. They want to protect and coddle men. That's like 28%, but don't worry, it's pretty minimal. Come on. So we started the stream talking about the death of patriarchy and how we're done coddling men right now and want to be pro children, pro wellness. And this isn't to say don't have a child with your partner if they are older, if they have diabetes, if they're obese, based on that first study. Like, that is not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is let's take shared responsibility for the wellness of our families, which, hello, directly connected to the shared responsibility that we need to take in general, not only in the DNA and epigenetics and the health and potential placental, or newborn possibilities, but this is just more evidence that we need shared responsibility when it comes to growing families, because a lot of men are out there looking for younger wives thinking that that's what's going to help them. And these are like, I even think of like pro-natalist, the natalist movement, which is Elon Musk is a part of, and that is this movement of eugenicists who are like pairing people and literally matchmaking. It's like a whole thing of matchmaking people with superior DNA. Sound familiar? So that they can have genetically superior children. And I'm gonna freaking go there right now because I know that this is either explicitly or subconsciously an influence on this very specifically white man, Asian women phenomenon, especially that we got here in the Bay Area. And I'm gonna say this because I am a product of a white man and Asian woman, but there is something to say and name in there, and I've heard it. I'm not saying this because I'm not just making this up. I have literally you can if you talk to some of these couples, they will there's a fetishization of mixed children that is based in this idea that mixing DNA with the right groups is beneficial, which probably is also related to the inbreeding of white people in the US who now are wanting to bring in Asian people who fit the like it's just all connected, fitting the model minority of like, oh, like I think about my ex-mother-in-law being like, Wow, Asian people are so good at everything. Um, Asian people are so pretty." No, I know a lot of ugly Asian people, and I know a lot of Asian people that aren't good at shit. So please save your eugenicism and your weird fetishization of why you think mixing Asian into your bloodline is going to benefit you. There we have. It's not just coming from me. You've heard at least two couples that have said this directly in the past decade. Yeah, they're not subtle about it. It's so fascinating, and we need to call it out more when we hear it because it's one of those weird things that's been normalized. And I make a lot of jokes about being Wasian, and that word like has just kind of entered into the sphere in recent years. Um, there's a lot of jokes about it, but also there's a lot of trauma in it. Like there's a lot of people who are Asian and white who are now adults like myself. I won't say really myself. I don't this is not really as big of a factor for my family, but I know there are many, many, many others who are looking at their parents and um, the dynamics of fetishization that are absolutely connected to desiring superior DNA and genetics. And so oh my god, I didn't even know this, but that does not surprise me at all. There are Bay Area elite circle parties specifically for white men and Asian women to meet. Yeah, it does not surprise me at all. So, how many of these people do you think are looking at their sperm? No, they're looking at women that they feel are going to give them the children. I think it's Elon Musk made like the creepiest post recently that was circulating about Steve Jobs' daughter, and she's white, but still the way he was like, "Oh, like imagine how brilliant she must be because her father was Steve Jobs and she's attractive. That's an anomaly. A smart and attractive woman. Wow, would love to he didn't say breed her, but he basically did. I don't know his exact words, but he basically said would love to breed her. And that man is obsessed with breeding children. He has hella children, and also the word on the street is he can't get it up. So that is okay, no judgment to people who can't get it up, but he's particularly obsessed with procreating for somebody who cannot do that through sex. Um, so this rant to close us out, this is the season finale of Crowning. We have been taken on a ride this season. We started with the reproductive justice movement. We have moved into the more spiritual, and we are closing with mermaids and pronatalists and Wasian propaganda. And that's just what we're about here. So I'm going to take some time off for the month of April. One, we got spring break starting next week. Two, I've got my beautiful pregnant clients to tend to that I want to use some of this time to integrate even the things that I've learned throughout our exploration here. Um, there's so much more evidence we could look at. I actually had like three more tabs of articles to peep. One of them was advanced maternal age on fertility. Another one was um, looking at the attachment through fathers and like attachment things on kids. So, you know, there's an endless world of information out there, and there's also an endless world of misinformation out there. And so I will never claim to be immune to misinformation, but my favorite thing that we've done on Crowning together is look at things, look at who wrote them, look at what other things may not be mentioned. Because as I said in my email, the role of a doula is not to know everything. The role of a doula is to support and hold that space for you to look at resources and decide how you want to let them affect you and influence you and your decisions. So I hope my point here was not to say don't be another Asian propaganda couple, but it might also be one of my hidden agendas. Um, you love who you love. And also, we exist in a politicized world and have politicized identities that should make us aware of what we may intentionally or not be perpetuating. So that's my closing statement on that. And this was crowning. If you want to stay connected with me, I get on my email list. I will be writing more on my newsletter now that I'll have a little energy preserved for the spring, taking a pause from this. And I would really, really love to hear from y'all in the comments, in however you want to share with me. I have my secure email as well if it's something more private. But I'd love to hear, what did you love about this? What would you like to see on this show in the future? I'm thinking interviews and birth stories, um, and even venturing beyond birth and the reproductive field, because that was feedback I got from Sanctuary Studio, which was that just looking at evidence and articles and current events in general together has been fun. So tell me what you loved, tell me what you didn't, and send it to a friend. If you would like to hire me as your spirit doula, as your guide through your own transition, whether it be pregnancy or otherwise. I have that all available on my website, and I will be launching very, very soon the next iteration of the Birth Realm offering. But it will be my last call for the offerings that are current on my website will probably be vanishing within the next 2 weeks. So see you there. See you on my email. And also join a free event at the Church of Soft Power, because um, all of the things we've talked about, all of the values that have been expressed here are also shared at our church for artists. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you and love y'all. Bye.